There's something I really love about stories and storytelling. I think that it's inherent in all of humanity to really love stories. We've passed down stories through generation to generation, even past the scope of generations, but from century to century. From era to era, some stories really last lifetimes. These fairy tales that we grow up with, whether it's Cinderella, whether it's Little Red Riding Hood, whether it's Hansel and Gretel, all of these stories, they have codes within them. There's codes within them that activate certain parts of our psyche. And just the act of reading a story, there's something magical about that as well. So recently, I have found myself really just falling in love and into this world of this new story, of this new fantasy fictional series that I've been reading. And it's the first fictional world that I've entered into in a very long time. I think for, over 5 years, 6 years, I've only been reading nonfiction, or if it's a fictional story, it's something that I've read before. So I've just been rereading the same stories over and over and over again, almost like in a comforting way. And I've realized that as I was reading this new story and feeling these emotions I hadn't felt in a very long time, like the emotion of, oh my God, what's going to happen? I'm like reading, and then all of a sudden I start crying and I'm like, no, or like, yes, or just I'm reacting in live time with the story that I'm reading from book to book. And I realized as I'm caught up in that emotion, I'm like, wow, I haven't felt like this in a really long time, where I'm just like so emotionally attached and absorbed into this story. I just need like the feeling of, oh my God, what's going to happen? Oh my God, how could she do that? Oh my God, yes. No, like just the emotional reactions that come. And I realized, wow, I haven't felt this in a really, really long time. And then I thought to myself, wow, I've really just been rereading the same stories over and over again. It's like I've been reliving the same story. I've been in like a loop, just in the same stories over and over again. How does that correlate with my life? My life also kind of looks like that. I've been just repeating the same stories over and over again. But I've been reading this new series and I realized, wow, I think I'm ready for a new story. Like I'm ready for a new story in my own life. So that was a really aha moment for me. And yeah, other than that, I've also been thinking about fairy tales, and I've been reading this book called Women Who Run with the Wolves. And it's all about the archetype of the wild woman. And the book, the way that it's laid out, it goes from story to story. And a lot of these stories are from traditions, myths, things from different cultures. And it goes from story to story, and then it compounds upon the story. It has an explanation of the story and how it activates parts of our psyche, how our psyche reacts to these stories, and how it can show us codes within the stories. So, for example, there's this story in the book, the first or second chapter. There's a monster of some kind, but he looks like a regular man, but he's like this killer, crazy person. And he murders a lot of women. But the thing is, he marries this unsuspecting, naive woman. And she just doesn't know anything about this, the other side of him. But her older sisters, they're like, I don't know about this guy, She marries him anyway and, starts living with him. And then he goes off somewhere for a week. He gives her the house keys and is like, okay, have fun, whatever. You can't go into this room though. Here's the key to that room, but you can't go in it. And she's like, okay. He leaves. And her older sisters come over and she tells them about that room that she can't enter. And they're like, okay, we absolutely have to find this room and we have to go in. And she's like, no, I can't. And they're like, no, we have to go. So they find the room. Turns out there's like blood and bones and corpses and the victims of his past in that room. And he finds out that she goes in the room. she tricks him. And then, long story short, her older brothers come and they kill the guy. It's kind of a weird story, right? It's kind of like this scary fairy tale story that is rooted from a culture and is from a long time ago. But the story has so much to show us, especially women. So the naive young girl, she represents the naive young girl inside of us. The part of us that is the girl before we become the woman, right? And the older sisters represent our wisdom, our intuition, the part of us that speaks the truth that we don't want to hear and we push it aside. And then the crazy person, the murderer, that's actually a part of ourselves too. Like every character, it's almost like when in a dream. When you have a dream, all these characters in the dream, you think that they're not you and you're like, they're your enemies or whatever, but actually every part of the dream is you, just a different archetype within you. And every part of the dream, all the different characters in the dream, they are you. So, as I'm reading this story about the murderer, I'm reacting like this. When the girl and the older sisters are telling her, we have to go find this room, you know how I react? I'm like, no, oh my God, how could you be so stupid? He told you not to go in that room. He told you not to go look in there. You're going to go look like, oh my God, something bad's going to happen. And I realize that my psyche has been living as a naive young girl, afraid to look at the things that my intuition, my older sisters within me, have been pressing me to look at. That's why it took me so long to leave a relationship that I knew I was supposed to look at the truths within that room. Not that my ex was anything like this guy, but my older sisters within me, the wisdom within me, the intuition from within me was trying to tell me to go look at this thing from day one, honestly, to be completely honest. And I pushed that aside and decided to close my eyes to that and just continue being the naive young girl. At least the girl in that story listened to her older sisters and looked at something even though she was terrified to do it. So we all have this thing within us where we need to look at it. And this could go for women and men, but part of the journey to really becoming a woman or this wild woman archetype and embracing that is to look at the things that we're scared to look at. And this story, it has the codes for us to kind of see that within ourselves. It's not just the story itself that has the lessons and the metaphor, but it's like how we react with the story. When you hear that story, when you read that story for the first time, it's like, are you on the side of the older sisters? You're like, yes, go look at that. Then that shows you something about where you're personally at. You're operating at the level of you listen to your intuition, to your wisdom, very more easily than maybe I did. So, yeah. Around the time that I was reading that story, I was in this little fling, a romantic fling that I knew was not going to last. We both knew it's not going to last. He's a wonderful guy, wonderful friend. Been friends for a very long time. And it just like shifted into something else, right? But we both knew that this is not going to last. And we were just, I guess, having fun with the moment. But I knew that this wasn't a match for me. I knew that this isn't the kind of man that I want to marry, that I want to have kids with. So why am I entertaining it? Why am I pretending otherwise? So as I'm reading this story, it like woke that up in me. And I decided I don't want to be the naive young girl anymore. I want to be the girl that listens to the older sisters. So yeah, the art of storytelling is a very ancient act, and it's a very human act. When I think about how parents make up stories for their kids to go to sleep or even read stories from books, it's such a traditional part of human nature to tell stories. And even the way that we communicate with our friends, we're like telling stories to each other about what happened in our lives, it's from our own perspective, and we create this story and we're like sharing our life through stories. And even with artists, I think the best art that really, and when I say best, I don't mean like the highest quality of like Renaissance level masterpiece art. I just mean the art that really resonates with people, the art that makes people feel something. I think it's because there's a story embedded. And the story is the key element of all creation that really makes us resonate with each other in creation. With movies, a great movie, is it all just graphics? I feel like we've all seen a movie that's just like very high level of graphics and artwork and maybe even acting as well and directing, and the music's great and the color grading is great, but the story sucks, the plot sucks. That automatically, no matter how high of a level everything else is, it brings the quality of the movie down. Something that's coming to mind is like Twilight. Twilight. Okay, the vampire movie. Everyone was like either Team Jacob or Team Edward, right? And I feel like that alone tells you where you were at, your development with your ideas of love and romance and the kind of person that you're drawn to. That kind of shows you something about it too. Now that we're all grown up, we can all say like Edward was a POS, okay? Edward was a manipulative, controlling vampire, a literal vampire, okay? Sucking the energy and the life out of something and controlling someone so under the guise of like, I love you so much that I have to do this. I have to hurt you in this way. Whereas Jacob is like the healthy love, the pure intentions, only wants the best for you and gives you the freedom that you are. You're your own person. But for some reason, when we were younger, there was this huge divide of like Team Edward, Team Jacob, and people romanticized the abusive element of the relationship that Bella and Edward had. And the thing is that most of the audience were younger at the time, teenagers, young adults. So yeah, it's not like we had a lifetime of maturing or a lifetime of experience of relationships in order to really make an educationally informed, life experience informed decision on Team Edward or Team Jacob. But I feel like the way we reacted to that story shows us something about where we were at that point in our lives. And as we're growing up and rewatching this series, because it's just a pivotal part of pop culture and a movie that, I'm sorry, but like if you don't know Twilight, who are you? Like, have you even lived? Okay, so I know that everyone rewatches Twilight. Okay, let's just like not even pretend otherwise. I know men and women, we are rewatching Twilight and also Harry Potter, but we're on Twilight at the moment, okay? So as we're older and we're rewatching this series, specifically right now because it's fall, it's hua 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 season. And as we're rewatching this, I feel like for me personally, I'm reacting to the story in such a different way than I was when I was younger. I don't even remember if I was Team Edward or Team Jacob. I was kind of just like, whatever happens, happens, I feel like I was a little bit more Team Edward though. But now I'm totally Team Jacob. Even though I know how the series ends, I just wish there was an alternate universe where Bella chose the healthier love that gave her freedom and, yeah, so stories. Stories are pretty amazing things. Something that I'm also kind of thinking about as far as storytelling is writing my own story. Recently, I started to write about what is my own life story. And I think the practice of writing your own life story is a very reflective and healthy practice to do, because as the years progress, the way you tell your story is really important. All of us came from most of us came from a whack family. Most of us came from a childhood that left us with some scars to deal with, and the goal is to give our kids a childhood that they don't have to heal from. But most of us in the current reality of, if you're listening to this, you possibly had something happen, some kind of emotional events in your childhood that you have now needed to heal from and process in your own way. And I think the way that we tell our own story shifts. Once you're fresh out of a breakup, the way you tell your story might be a little bit more on the negative side. He did this and that and this and that, and I had to go through this. And, when a friendship breakup happens, oh my God, they did this to me, and I went through all of this with them. But as the years progress, your storytelling of those events also shift. Naturally, but also with inner work, just with maturing, you start to see a bigger picture. I went through a pretty gnarly friendship breakup, and the way I told my story at first was very unhealthy for me, very victimizing for me, myself, and I. But as the years have progressed, the way, if I tell that story, it's not like I go around and just tell that story to everybody, but when it comes up, the way I tell my story is a lot more detached, and it's also with a lot more grace. Admitting my own mistakes, looking at it and being honest. It's a lot more honest is what it is. We just weren't a good match. We had different values. I did some things, they did some things, and our way of communicating, it just was so immature, and things fell apart. And it's like shifting the blame from being all on them or being all on me. It's shifting the blame to just, what? We both did things happen, we fell apart, and it's releasing the energy of blame. I say this with a grain of salt, though, because I know that there are some stories where someone is just such an abuser, or there's no way to really shift the blame from not being on a person at times. But as the years progress, maybe we can give them even just a breadcrumb of grace. Maybe in their childhood, they went through some things that were just unforgivable, that they just could never heal from. Maybe we can extend them just the tiniest grain of rice-sized grace. So yeah, the way we tell our own stories, I think it's really important to be mindful of how are we telling our own story. When somebody asks you, how was your day? You can even approach that like a story. You can either go at it, if things were difficult that day, you can stay in that energy and, be like, it was so hard. I had to do this and this, and just harp on every negative thing that happened that day. Or you can tell the story of the exact same day in a different light. Today I had some moments that were hard, but I did my best to just get through it. And, the highlights for me were I had a really good meal. I was able to see a really pretty sunset. I got some fresh air. I did a little bit of reading in this book I'm really enjoying right now. And it kind of made the day better for me. Or you know what? Honestly, I didn't have the best day. Some things happened that were really emotionally draining for me. But I am really just doing my best to stay grounded. I'm doing my best to just be gentle with myself and not resort to escapism. Yeah, I'm just here. I'm doing my best. But honestly, I'm not doing that great. We can tell our story in different ways. So, I feel like that's what I have to say on the art of stories. Yeah. This is a really beautiful part about human nature and human history that I hope we get to hold on to for centuries, millennia to come. I hope we're telling stories that last. Especially once we're parents, when you're telling your kids stories, they're going to hold on to that and remember that, and maybe tell it to their own kids, who will tell it to their own kids, who will tell it to their own kids. And I want to be somebody that tells stories with grace, with humor, with honesty, and I want to tell a good story. I want to captivate people with stories too. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. Maybe you can ask yourself, how do you want to tell your own story? Maybe that could be a good journaling prompt for you. I hope you enjoyed this little episode on storytelling and just my thoughts. I really came at this with no planning. I'm just like free flowing. So, yeah. This has been the Here to Be Free podcast. I'm Jixie. I'm so thankful that you're here. Sending you love from wherever you are in the world. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.